The story of Loretta Young and Clark Gable's secret daughter reads like the script of a Hollywood melodrama, except the stakes were higher and the damage more lasting than any movie could capture. To understand it, you have to step back into the 1930s, into a world where glamour was everything. The studios held near total control over stars' lives, and morality was both a selling point and a straitjacket. It's a story about power and silence, about a woman forced into secrecy by the collision of religion, reputation, and the machinery of Hollywood, and about a child who grew up under the shadow of that lie. Loretta Young was one of the quintessential beauties of classic Hollywood. Doe-eyed, luminous, and poised, she had been working since she was a toddler. Her real name Gretchen swapped for the more marketable Loretta when she was still a teenager. By the time she was in her early 20s, she had already starred in dozens of films, often playing characters that reflected her own off-screen persona. Virtuous, fragile, devoted. She came from a working-class family that had converted to Catholicism, and her mother ruled the home with iron discipline and religious fervor. Loretta's sisters were actresses too, but Loretta's beauty and talent set her apart. That beauty, however, made her a target in a predatory system. Hollywood was rife with powerful men who saw actresses as conquests. Clark Gable was one of those men. By 1935, he was on the cusp of superstardom, winning acclaim for It Happened One Night and cultivating an image as the rugged, irresistible king of Hollywood. He was also a notorious womanizer, married but endlessly unfaithful, his affairs shielded by MGM's powerful publicity machine and its army of fixers. That winter, Loretta and Gable were cast together in Call of the Wild, shot on location in Mount Baker, Washington. It was a grueling shoot. Sub-zero temperatures, frozen film stock, cast and crew snowed in for weeks. Loretta and Gable flirted openly, clowning around on camera, feeding the kind of gossip the studios loved to fan. But what happened on the train ride back to Hollywood was something Loretta would never truly speak of until the final years of her life. According to accounts pieced together decades later, Gable entered Loretta's sleeping compartment during the overnight trip. She never described the encounter in detail. She never told her sisters, her mother, or her closest friends. What she did reveal in the 1990s, when the term date rape entered the mainstream, was that she suddenly realized that was what had happened to her. To her daughter-in-law and her biographer, she admitted in her 80s, "That's what happened between me and Clark." At the time, in 1935, there was no vocabulary for such an experience. Rape was something brutal that happened in dark alleys, not something that could happen between co-stars who had been playfully flirting on a movie set. For a devout Catholic woman like Loretta, raised to believe that female chastity was her responsibility, the shame was overwhelming. And soon, there was another problem. She was pregnant. Pregnancy outside marriage was ruinous for a star in the 1930s. The studios had strict morality clauses, and the press, though controlled, could turn merciless if scandal broke. MGM would have arranged for a quiet abortion, as they had done for other stars, but Loretta's Catholic faith made that impossible for her. To terminate the pregnancy was, in her view, a mortal sin. To confess it openly would destroy her career and her family's reputation. There was only one option left: conceal it. With the help of her mother and sisters, Loretta embarked on an elaborate cover-up. She maintained a grueling filming schedule through the early months, then claimed exhaustion and illness. Gossip columnists dutifully reported that she was the most tired little person in Hollywood. In June, she left for an extended trip to Europe, her absence explained as a retreat for her health. By August, when she returned, her doctor prescribed rest and forbade her from film work, citing an extremely delicate condition, a euphemism everyone in the industry understood but did not openly question. On November 6, 1935, in a cottage in Venice, California, Loretta gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Judy after St. Jude, the patron saint of difficult cases. The father's name was left off the birth certificate. That same day, a telegram was sent to Clark Gable in New York announcing the birth of a blue-eyed baby girl. He allegedly tore it up on the spot. He would never publicly acknowledge Judy as his daughter. For several weeks, Loretta lived in seclusion with the baby and a nurse. But even with the secrecy, cracks appeared. A nurse threatened to blackmail Loretta. Rumors circulated in Hollywood. The solution was drastic. Judy was placed in a Catholic orphanage. 18 months later, Loretta adopted her own daughter, announcing to gossip columnist Luella Parsons that she had taken in a baby girl along with an older child. Conveniently, the older child's relatives soon reclaimed her, leaving Loretta with just Judy, her own biological daughter, now shielded under the fiction of adoption. the deception worked. Loretta returned to her career, her wholesome image intact. She became more famous than ever, winning an Academy Award for The Farmer's Daughter in 1947, hosting the Loretta Young Show throughout the 1950s, and publicly championing morality and Catholic values. She was known for keeping a swear jar on her sets, fining anyone who cursed. But behind closed doors, she was raising Judy under a cloud of secrecy. For Judy, childhood was confusing and painful. She looked different from her siblings. She had the unmistakable protruding ears of Clark Gable, so pronounced that Loretta had them surgically pinned back when Judy was 7. Loretta kept her in bonnets to disguise the resemblance. The truth was whispered in Hollywood circles, but never spoken in the Young household. It wasn't until Judy was engaged at 23 that she learned the truth. Her fiancé confronted her, saying he couldn't marry someone who didn't know her own background. He told her flatly, "Your father is Clark Gable." Judy was stunned. Her mother refused to discuss it openly. The truth hovered between them like a wound that could never heal. Judy eventually built a career of her own. She acted in soap operas, produced television scripts, even appeared on Broadway. Later, she became a psychotherapist, working with foster children and teenagers who had experienced abandonment. Perhaps unsurprisingly, she connected deeply with children who felt rejected because she herself had lived under the shadow of concealment. In 1994, she published her memoir, Uncommon Knowledge, laying out the truth of her parentage and the deception that had shaped her life. The book caused a rift between her and Loretta. At a Mother's Day gathering, Judy begged her mother to admit the truth. Loretta fled to her room and vomited. For years afterward, they barely spoke. Judy's memoir portrayed Gable as distant but not cruel, and her mother as a woman trapped by hypocrisy. "My life," she wrote in the opening pages, "has been filled with hypocrisy and deception from the moment I was born." Meanwhile, Gable had gone on to further fame, starring in Gone with the Wind in 1939, marrying Carol Lombard in what became a legendary Hollywood love story until her tragic death in a plane crash. He remarried again in 1949, had another child shortly before his own death in 1960, and never publicly acknowledged Judy. Loretta Young maintained her silence until the very end. She never admitted publicly that Judy was her biological child, but in her final years, shaken by the revelations of her daughter's memoir and by the growing cultural conversation about sexual violence, she finally put words to what had happened to her. In her Palm Springs home in the late 1990s, she asked her biographer and her daughter-in-law to explain the term date rape. When they did, she quietly said, "That's what happened between me and Clark." It was a staggering admission. For over 60 years, she had lived under the belief that the assault was somehow her fault, that she had been careless, sinful, or complicit. Only in the last chapter of her life did she recognize herself as a victim, not an accomplice. When she died in 2000, her posthumous memoir confirmed the truth. Judy Lewis was her daughter with Clark Gable. Judy died in 2011 at the age of 76 after a career dedicated to helping children who had been discarded or silenced. She left behind her own children and grandchildren, a legacy of resilience carved out of secrecy and pain. The saga of Loretta Young, Clark Gable, and their secret daughter is one of Hollywood's greatest cover-ups, but it is also more than that. It is a window into a world where women had little control, where morality was weaponized, where silence was enforced. Loretta Young wasn't the only actress forced to hide a pregnancy, nor the only woman pressured into silence about assault, but her story, with its mixture of glamour and hypocrisy, faith and deception, captures the contradictions of an era. Today, in the light of Me Too, it is easier to see the contours of her predicament. She wasn't just a star protecting her career. She was a woman grappling with trauma in a culture that had no room for her truth. She played her role until the end, but in her final words on the matter, she gave the truth the only name she had left: rape. And so the story of Loretta Young and Clark Gable's daughter isn't just an old Hollywood scandal. It's a story about survival, silence, and the belated discovery of language that could finally make sense of the past. It's about Judy Lewis, who lived a life of honesty after growing up in lies. And it's about how power silences women until the tide of history slowly begins to listen.